Although today's date will forever be associated with the jihadist massacre of some 3,000 Americans, 4 centuries earlier, September 11th was celebrated as the day when a small band of Christian knights defeated a massive Muslim horde. Far from being a day of defeat and mourning, it was a day of victory and celebration. Here's a brief summary. After continuously suffering at the hands of the Knights of St. John, also known as the Hospitallers, a Christian military order, the Islamic Empire of the Ottoman Turks decided enough was enough and declared a full-blown jihad on Malta, the Knights' headquarters. In the spring of 1565, nearly 50,000 Muslims armed to the teeth and with all sorts of heavy artillery descended on the tiny Mediterranean island, which was defended by the Knights of St. John and a few thousand shabbily armed Maltese men. Enter Jean, or John, de Valette, the master of the knights. His disposition is rather sad, wrote a contemporary, but for his age, 71, he is very robust and very devout. As the vast Islamic armada approached, Master John gathered and told his knights what was at stake. He said, quote, "A formidable army composed of audacious barbarians is descending on this island. These persons, my brothers, are the enemies of Jesus Christ. Today it is a question of the defense of our faith, as to whether the gospel is to be superseded by the Quran. God on this occasion demands of us our lives, already vowed to his service. Happy will those be who first consummate this sacrifice," meaning those who first become martyred by Muslims. For the record, every Hospitaller knight was, since their order was first militarized over 4 centuries earlier in the Holy Land, vowed to fight to the death against, in Master John's words, the enemies of Jesus Christ, who were then known as Saracens, Turks, and or Moors, in a word, Muslims. Once the Turks arrived in May of 1565, they subjected Malta, beginning with the fort of St. Elmo, to what was then the heaviest non-stop bombardment of any locale in history. With the roar of the artillery, a chronicler wrote of this siege, the hair-raising screams, the smoke and fire and flame, it seemed that the whole world was at the point of exploding. The vastly outnumbered and soon wearied knights, who had been ordered by Master John to, quote, "fight bravely and sell your lives to the barbarians as dearly as possible," did just that. And for every Christian killed defending the forts of Malta, dozens of Muslim besiegers died. After storming the fort of St. Elmo and reducing it to rubble, the Turks sadistically slaughtered all its remaining defenders. The Knights of St. John were literally hung upside down from iron rings, had their heads split, eyes gouged, their chests open, and their hearts and entrails pulled out and hurled to the floor in full sight of the other forts. The Muslim commander, Mustafa, then ordered their mutilated corpses nailed to wooden crosses and set adrift in the Grand Harbor to mock and demoralize the other Christian defenders, looking on from their forts. The terror tactic failed. The 71-year-old Master John of Valette delivered a thundering and defiant speech before the rest of the knights and the terrified people of Malta. Next, he beheaded all his Muslim prisoners and fired their noggins from cannon at the Turkish besiegers. Not only was this meant to avenge his fallen brethren, it was meant to make the rest of the Christians of Malta understand that they were in a do-or-die situation, for the Muslims would never show any mercy after this act of defiance. The Ottomans continued to subject the rest of the tiny island, more a rock really, to a sustained bombardment. Some 130,000 cannonballs were fired in total. "I don't know if the image of hell can describe the appalling battle," wrote a contemporary. "The fire, the heat, the continuous flames from the flamethrowers and the fire hoops, the thick smoke, the stench, the disemboweled and mutilated corpses, the clash of arms, the groans, shouts, and cries, the roar of the guns, men wounding, killing, scrabbling, throwing one another back, falling and firing. Although the rest of the forts were reduced to rubble, much Muslim blood was spilled for each inch gained. For whenever they got within arm's reach, a historian writes, the scimitar was no match for the long two-handed sword of the Christians. Desperate fighting spilled into the streets, where even Maltese women and children participated. By late August, the island had still not been taken. That, and mass Muslim casualties, led to mass demoralization in the Ottoman camp. Embarrassed talk of lifting the siege had already begun when a Sicilian relief force finally arrived with some 10,000 soldiers at St. Paul's Bay, the place where the famed apostle was once shipwrecked. There, the final scene of this Armageddon played out as the fresh newcomers routed the retreating Ottomans. The Muslims finally fled and Malta was liberated on September 11th, a day which for many years thereafter was celebrated all throughout Christendom, until it was supplanted with something else in the year 2001. I should let you know that the full story of the 1565 siege of Malta is much more dramatic, heroic, and inspiring than this brief video, which barely scratches the surface, can ever hope to capture. Rather, this video is merely meant to commemorate and summarize. If you're interested in getting the full story, which is much more epic and amazing than any Hollywood movie, be sure to get a copy of my forthcoming book, The Two Swords of Christ, which deals with both the Knights of the Temple and the Knights of the Hospital, the latter also known as the Knights of St. John. 35 pages of that book are dedicated to this siege, recounting it in full and gory detail. It truly validates the saying that truth is stranger than fiction.